pomeriggio, benvenuti al nostro quarto dialogo sull'innovazione. Assalamu alaikum, rahmatullah wa barakatuh, marhaban bikum fi hiwaratina حول الابتكار. هذا لقاؤنا الرابع المخصص لعالم الموضة. Good afternoon, welcome again to our dialogues on innovation, organized with the Embassy of Italy to the UAE and with the cooperation of the other Italian diplomatic missions in the Gulf area. A few words to resume the general philosophy of the series. This pandemic, with the isolation it brought, confronted us with the importance of technological resources. They definitely helped us keep going. But speaking of cultural experiences of arts, education, customs and habits, even the beliefs of the human communities, the technological help seems to remain at the sides because culture is a human experience involving a physical sharing. But is this just a pre-COVIDic, obsolete idea of culture? Or will it continue to make sense in a post-pandemic future? Will we still be able to share again together the cultural life of our communities, forgetting the meters that keep us apart and the fear of the others? Will we approach once more culture with simplicity, authentically being in the middle of it, using all the senses we are gifted with, touching, smelling, fully enjoying our reality here and now? Today, we talk about fashion, and we address these questions to some representatives of the fashion world. First, Chiara Tronville, an Italian fashion journalist, storyteller, communication specialist, based in Milan. A recent article you published, Chiara, is entitled 2020 Fashion Year Zero. Could you please tell us your point of view on this expression? Please, Chiara.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me here today. This is an article I wrote during the pandemic. Can you hear me? Yes, of course. And yes, during the pandemic, while we were just isolated, and we were forced in fashion more than in other industries, maybe because fashion is such an important industry in Italy also, to rethink processes and to think about authenticity and a new future. Maybe more local, but also very important about social impact. I would like to to say that in the last few months we experienced an acceleration in the use of technology. I think we could say that the pandemic put some pressure on these fashion processes, from the global supply chain, very complicated, to the way clothes are presented and delivered. Things that we were expecting to see evolving, but maybe not so quickly. So this has been positive in a way, because during the lockdown, technology helped us basically connecting and talking at a deep level and working and going on with our lives and our businesses. There's been maybe yes, a big fall of consumers, and in this difficult time, in webinars and forum, we had the chance to imagine the change we want to see in the fashion world, rethinking crazy rhythms and seasonality also. some big brands made statements in the last months. Giorgio Armani about the overproduction and the necessity to slow down for the whole system. And Gucci, for example, Alessandro Michele, the fashion director, just announced through his Instagram profile that he was stopping presenting pre-collections. Maybe you're not all familiar with the crazy rhythms of the fashion calendar that consists in two main seasons, spring, summer, and fall, winter, but also two pre-collections, basically invented to sell more and more. This crowded calendar has been putting too much pressure on the designers. So this was one of the topics we were speaking about during the lockdown. But during the lockdown, there's also been an explosion, I would say, of creativity. We had the first fully digital fashion weeks, Shanghai in March, and then London in June, Milan in July. It was the first time I had time actually to watch and discover the contents posted in the platform from leader brands, because during Fashion Week, beside the big shows, there are many leader brands you usually cannot see because you don't have time. There are too many presentations. And through movies and special contents, virtual rooms and augmented reality, we discovered so many new things. So I have to say, thank you, technology. But despite all this technology, we were, I think, about the end of July, overwhelmed by content. I mean, we missed interaction with other people, you know, confronting other people, the social side of creativity, and most of all, the empathy with colleagues and that sense of belonging to the system that is making sense, most of all. Also, the sense of belonging, I have to say, with my city, with Milan, that with no more tourists and no more jobs for real events, it was like a phantom town. Fortunately, in September, we came back partially to the physical presentations, and we have understood that this is what we like. Last Milano Fashion Week was an hybrid between physical and digital, so everything was online, accessible from everyone, from everywhere, all around the world, which is good, finally, very good. And advertising for Milano Fashion Week, but we had the possibility to attend again some physical events like shows and even fairs. There's been also a small edition of the White Show. Maybe you don't know, but usually beside the fashion shows, there are also these kind of fairs. They're putting together many brands. White Show puts together more than 500 fashion brands, and this time it was just about 200. It was more little, but it really meant a lot for buyers and for us, for the journalists, going back to the roots, to the experience of meeting and commenting and just enjoying being together. You know, I think fashion is all about who you are and where you want to go, who you want to be in the future. I think it is a cultural aspect of our life, need interaction, empathy, self-expression, freedom, and most of all, I think, humanity. So technology can be the tool, but not the goal, and can tell a story, but it's not the story. I've been to Emilio Pucci showroom last week, for example, and I saw how the campaigns are working at the moment, presenting and selling clothes through a live camera. Well, I think for buyers, it must be very difficult to buy something without touching fabrics, entering in the mood of the collection, having a coffee even with the creative team, and experiencing just that good feelings, you know. So I think that for creativity and innovation, it's fundamental that people can meet, live, and build together the future. You cannot live and experience the same poetry and emotion through a digital tool. So I think also for the future, we are not abandoning definitely the physical dimension. It's good technology. Now we must use this tool even more to emphasize and amplifying our messages, I think. But I also think that fashion cannot transform itself in a virtual business. For Italy, it's the second industry, and with more than 50,000 companies producing quality craftsmanship for the world, is anything but virtual. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Grazie Chiara, grazie Chiara Tronville for these remarks.
Thank you.
And for introducing us to the heart of our talk today. Now I am proud to introduce to the friends of Italy, Budreya Faisal. She is a fashion designer in Abu Dhabi and Dubai. She founded the contemporary Emirati label Bleach in 2012 after being in the fashion industry since 2009. One of the 50 Emiratis who inspire, one of the 25 Emirati women achievers, just to mention a couple of books that name her, Budreya loves Italy and decided to study in Milan at the Scuola Politecnica di Design. Interesting enough, she didn't study fashion design, but car design. So I think she can offer us a wider point of view on the aesthetic experience and its communication in these challenging times. Please, Budreya.
Hello, and thank you for having me on this webinar. Speaking on my time in Italy and what I had actually studied there. Studying car design was not something I had planned, but something that definitely helped me in my design aesthetic moving forward. But more importantly, life in Italy is actually what helped me discover my own fashion sense and my own style. And that wasn't through a magazine or something I saw online. It was living in Milan. I came back a different person. I came back with an identity that I knew and I was very sure of. And that helped me so much in translating that into my designs going forward in Bleach and absolutely anything else I did. If it weren't for real life connection, people would not be able to tell that my designs are somewhat inspired by my previous education in car design. Few people, when they hear that that is actually what I studied, my designs and my aesthetic make sense to them because of the structure that I use and because of the texture that I use, which is more important to me than print and many other things. It's the subtleties in design, which you do not see on digital media. It's something you need to feel, and that tactile connection is very important to my clients and for me to show to my clients as well. One thing that had actually come out of this COVID situation, in the beginning in this region, I feel that it has sparked panic between many designers. We're all on these WhatsApp groups, we all talk to each other. There was so much panic that was about sales. What are we going to do? How are we going to survive? But some designers, I feel, got maybe unfortunately stuck in the panic mode and worrying more about sales, while others inspired many by taking advantage of this and seeing it as an opportunity to connect to their clients in a different way. Because now that we were all locked in, we had time and we had space. We had mental capacity to actually think beyond design and sales and just the daily routine of fashion and our ateliers. We were now thinking of stories and how do we share these with our clients? How do we get them to know who we are past our aesthetic and our logos and our shops or ateliers? And it started some very interesting conversations. I think we all took that as an opportunity to connect in a different way. And unfortunately for our region, we are not the strongest in the extremely modern and creative digital approaches that other countries have been able to take to make up for the setback caused by COVID. For example, there was a campaign started somewhere in Northern Europe that kind of digitized outfits with the actual photo of an outfit, but you can kind of 3D design that outfit on you. So if I took a selfie of myself, I would see a photo of myself in that outfit, not as a design, but as an actual image and a moving video. And I started to look at things like that I was very, very excited about, thinking, how can I do this here? How can I do it for my abayas? There was no chance in this region. There was no chance because very few companies were that forward thinking, because now we're not just thinking of fashion forward, this is digital, this is the tech world. And it's things that haven't been done except once or twice. So our inability to take on the extreme creative things that were maybe groundbreaking for our region or the industry in general pushed us to look at the opportunity in terms of simply connecting with our clients. The things that we could not cater to when it came to, again, the sense of touch, we had to make up for in communication. And that was, I think, very much appreciated by a lot of our clients. And it also made them favor some brands differently, because some brands were actually now speaking to them instead of just trying to sell to them, which is very, very important. Another thing is, for these clients, I personally, in my atelier, I haven't been going to see my clients when they come shopping. I just didn't enjoy the experience as much, or just don't want to be around numbers or money talks or anything like that. But the one thing that actually is very important for me is the conversation I have with a client when they're in my atelier, when they're in my showroom. That conversation, that relationship is very important to them and to me. So it's not about whether they're buying or not. It's the honesty they get from me, which they might not get from a salesperson, where I can tell a client, actually, that's not very flattering on you, but try this, maybe this is. Or you know what, maybe none of this is good for you, but just wait for the next collection. I have something in mind for you. You can't have these conversations online. You can't tell someone, is this gonna work for you or is it not? And that adds a lot to, once again, that trust that's very important to build. But now, obviously things are changing. A lot of brands are not joining, participating in these big events that are happening around town and everywhere else in the world. But here, at least in the UAE, especially in the abaya world, we don't rely so much on stockists as much as we do on sales events that we create. So they're group sales events, which we have before Ramadan. And we sell like crazy, depending on your brand. But some brands do really, really well. And we rely on that one time a year to do that. Sometimes twice, and it depends where. So for me, it's here and it's Saudi Arabia. Dubai, Riyadh is where I can retire based on just those two cities alone on a couple of events, and I'm good. But with the lack of these events, or the lack of interest of many designers to actually move forward with these events or participate in them, we're still kind of reluctant to open our doors to more than just a few clients in at the showroom one at a time, because we're not in a rush. For the brands who are lucky enough to survive this, we should play the slow game, I think. It's not rushing, it's not selling, and it's very important, again, not to overproduce. But again, for my specific kind of, the kind of garments that we design, we don't go into overproduction. For myself, I design to order. So I design custom pieces for every client by size and all of that. So I don't have a stock problem per se, and we're all moving towards sustainability anyway. And this actually has helped so many designers go in that direction as well, and see the importance of it and the importance of just not wasting and not over ordering samples and not even consuming the oil used by the airplanes that are dropping off your sample fabrics when you order 20 times, versus let's think of how we can make this easier on our actual planet while we're designing smaller quantities for our clients who are very happy to stay loyal clients, and we're blessed to have them, and we're happy to play the long game. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much, dear Budreya, for sharing with us your thoughts and also your wise words. Unusual 1976 is a modest street style brand based in Milan. It is the first modest fashion brand entirely made in Italy. They are an emerging brand born just last February. And one word on modest fashion, maybe we all know what it is, but let me say 2 words. It's not simply an Islam-friendly way of dressing, but more generally, it's a less revealing clothing guided by personal preferences as well as reasons of faith. Since the beginning, Italy has welcomed modest fashion as a cultural phenomenon. It is enough to think, for example, that in 2015, the University of Turin dedicated an international academic symposium to define it and to outline its future. The 2 stylists of Unusual 1976 have opted to stay anonymous. We respect this, so I welcome their spokesperson, Doralice Belli, speaking to us from the United States. Please, Doralice.
Thank you very much for the introduction and for having us here. As you mentioned, Unusual is a brand recently born. It was exactly launched in February to align with the Fashion Week, and then it was immediately hit by the pandemic. And as you can imagine, it's particularly been challenging for young brands such as Unusual, since in times of uncertainty and fear for even your own health, you tend to experiment less and revert more to what is familiar. But when we have to talk about the impact of COVID on the fashion industry, it's useful to make a distinction between the short and longer term. We've all experienced firsthand the impact on our lives of the lockdown, of the travel restriction. Many countries imposed the closing of physical stores, forcing consumers to completely shift online, and most companies even switched to remote working. Even the consumers' buying preferences have shifted, given this shift in usage occasions. To give you a few examples, we have seen spikes in casual wear and athleisure, or even in tops and statement earrings that pop on camera when you are on Zoom meetings. And in general, as it was mentioned before by everyone, even a reduction in consumption. This is particularly true for the Arab world, as many pieces of modest wear are intrinsically linked to the social component. Women tend to wear items such as the abaya or the hijab when they go out of their homes or are in a social setting. With the lockdown, the needs for these items, of course, reduced a bit, like the formal wear that we have seen for many luxury brands. An example that I have in my mind is when I was on a conference call with a Muslim colleague, and she preferred not to turn on the video because she was not wearing the hijab in this moment. So we see how the consumption was really different during the hard phase of the pandemic. The good news is that the short-term issues brought by the pandemic will be reabsorbed once we are over it. There are, however, longer-term effects that will most likely stay, and are those related to what the behavioral researchers call the secular trends. Those are trends that are already present in the pre-COVID world, but were somehow accelerated because of the pandemic. The 2 main examples are the acceleration of the online penetration and flexibility in the workplace. On the first trend, we have seen in just 1 year a jump in the penetration of the online that analysts predicted we would have otherwise reached in 5 years. These have clear consequences for any brand that wants to remain in business in the long run. Now more than ever, as also Chiara mentioned, it is paramount to offer an online experience that is seamless from the user interface, omnichannel, the payments, the logistics, the customer care, and so on. Brands need to work on how to engage and bewitch customers in the digital space, which is much tougher than in the offline world because we have fewer distractions when we are in a store, and we can have a more direct conversation, and we can lever a multisensorial experience. We've been mentioning before the touch of the fabric, the feel of being immersed in a collection, the smells around the store. That's where I see the biggest innovation coming in the next 5 to 10 years. The holy grail everyone is focusing on today is how to improve the fit in the online world. How do you make sure that consumers can purchase the right size and you avoid the returns and you make the experience more pleasant? But what about experiencing the fabric hand? What about the store smell? I'm currently based in the Silicon Valley, and I know that in Stanford, the research laboratories, they're studying how to translate the olfactory stimuli into binary codes, just as a computer would read them. Fast forward this by 10 years, and who knows how the digital experience would look like. Also, we have seen the rise in virtual avatar as Instagram influencers, and many brands creating ad hoc virtual clothing for them. So I believe that the pandemic will not substitute the physical experience, but will somehow expand it and create completely new and unexpected way of consuming. The second biggest trend that I was mentioning that was accelerated by the pandemic is the flexibility in the workplace. Many companies that moved to the concept of work from home to that of work from anywhere by relaxing their policies on where the employees are allowed to work. While this is an interesting proposition for many managerial roles, the fashion industry is quite peculiar, as everyone was noting before, because the whole product development process revolves around the materials, the shapes, the detailing, the fit, which are really hard to translate into a virtual environment. Given the current state of technology, of course, we can expect a bit like the consumer side that technology might enable some new forms of interactions. But for today, designers, procurement buyers, merchandisers, especially in the luxury world, struggle to completely transfer their daily activities to a remote setting. I've been in many meetings where the designer or the buyer would decide on which fabric to go for simply by rubbing their fingers on it, or they would decide which color by opening a window and seeing how it reflects the sunlight. During fitting also, it's important to see how the garment wraps the body, how it moves, and to make real-time adjustments. These considerations are, of course, different for instance, the fast fashion universe, where there is less focus on the product quality and more on price, and where many processes are already standardized, if not even automatized. An interesting aspect that was noted by Chiara before, where the virtual world and the lack of geographical barriers have come together in the fashion industry, is the digitalization of the fashion week. And this has also completely changed the rule of the game, as before the runway was a privilege reserved to insiders or to the high-profile customers. And now that its fruition has been democratized by moving them completely to the online world, brands need to come up with new ways of engaging their most important stakeholders, potentially leveraging once again the online space, given the current travel limitation and the fear for the pandemic. To conclude, it is really hard to say what's next for the fashion industry. Online innovation will clearly play a role even bigger than we would have imagined. But on the consumption side, it is still unclear whether once the pandemic is over, consumers will engage in what some opinion leaders call revenge shopping to compensate for all these months of restrictions, or if consumers will realize that they don't really need as much and will reshape the pace at which fashion is consumed and will shift their preferences towards functionality, durability, and sustainability. If I have to give my personal opinion, I stand with the opinions given before, and also with the words of Giorgio Armani in his open letter to Women West Daily, where he sees the pandemic as the occasion that we needed to slow down and realign the whole industry to a more sustainable model. Thank you.
Thank you, Doralice Belli from Unusual 1976. And now another tribute to Arab fashion with Amal Al Raisi, fashion designer based in Muscat, Oman. She began her career designing traditional Omani dresses like abayas, but as time went by, her style turned into a global design, elegant and modest. Unlike others, Amal didn't give up on launching a new collection in the fall 2020, drawing inspiration, I would say, with a strong anti-lockdown mental operation from the shapes and colors of the Omani mountains. Dear Amal, what are your thoughts on fashion design mid and post-pandemic? And do you agree that fashion, without its physical dimension, is no longer itself, whether it's a show or a direct approach to fabrics and shapes?
Hello, everyone, and thank you for having me. I think fashion is all about perceptions, and fashion is a multifaceted industry that appeals to not only one of our senses, but it's to most of our senses. Fashion is something that you can see, you can feel, you can touch. Definitely for during this pandemic, we were forced to use technology, and technology. This was a positive effect where it forced us and pushed us to start using technology. Whereas maybe without this, it was going to take us much more to get to use what we did of technology. I think technology has helped fashion designers to reach worldwide to different clients from different parts of the world. But still, it's not like the experience when a client comes into the boutique or gets to feel the fabric, touch the fabric. And also for designers, it's very difficult to showcase a collection without having the clients come and experience. Because once a client comes into a department store or into a boutique, it's about the whole experience of the brand. You get to feel the brand, you get to see everything that gets you into the mood of the brand. Whereas with technology, it's only the sight sense where you just see the fabric, you can't touch it, you can't feel it. A client's experience when they get to see a designer or get into a department store is completely different than when a client buys online. Like as a designer, I would love to tell, like I generally base my designs on stories. So every season, every collection has a different story. And I love to share my stories with my clients. So a client comes in and these stories are not necessarily in very clear in the design. It's only when I get to explain to my clients how we created the print and what's the inspiration behind it, then the client would know and would appreciate the design much better. When we get to explain to the client the process that went into creating certain designs, we have a lot of embellishment in our work. So when client get to know the experience and get to know the stories from the designer. It's a whole different experience, especially when it comes to luxury items or luxury dresses. It's not the same when you see the piece in actual than when you buy it online. It's a completely different story.
Grazie mille to Amal Al Raisi for her insights and suggestions. Just 1 year ago, in October 2019, when the pandemic took its very first steps, the internet turned 50 years old. 50 years that have gradually redesigned our way of being in the world. And by now, we live in a hybrid reality where technology influences and modifies us. Reciprocally, we use and sometimes abuse technology. It's a continuous dialectic between the artificiality of technology and the biological capabilities typical of a human being. With an enthusiasm that I personally do not share at all, there is more and more talk about on-life, a fusion of online and offline. It means that the opposition between virtual and real is now cancelled. On these issues, in reference to fashion, we will close our meeting with Pamela Berry, an American who decided to live and work in Italy. An award-winning art director and designer, Pamela Berry was art director for 5 years at the magazine La Repubblica delle Donne. Thank you very much for being with us, Pamela. I leave the floor to you.
Hello. Thank you for asking me to be here. Can you hear me? Yes. Yes, I've been working in Italy for more than 5 years, actually, but I've been at La Repubblica the last 5 years. And I work mostly with the covers, and I worked mostly with the fashion department. I've been in magazines for many, many years. I started maybe 20, 30 years ago. And one of the reasons I personally love magazines is the same reason that people love books, to pick them up and to learn something that we might not actually know about. And I think that fashion was always, magazines were a vehicle for fantasy, also to express one's a certain different way of seeing things. And fashion is always creative in that way. They create fairy tales and stories for people to dream and people to be transported in another place. We've been working with technology for a long time in magazines because we used to, you know, we work with photographs, we work with type. We used to paste things literally down on pieces of paper, and then slowly everything became on computers. We didn't work anymore with taking the pictures and making the scans. Everything became digital already for us maybe 10 years ago. What did change with the coronavirus, with the COVID and this pandemic, was that all of a sudden we found ourselves without access, without the human contact, which was hard because photo shoots were canceled, stylists couldn't do their work, makeup people were put on hold, the fashion shoots were put on hold. Everything was, it became a little bit difficult for us also. We couldn't produce any pages. And I think that I think a lot of people saw that magazines had to be creative with their covers, with their fashion stories. People were doing illustrated fashion stories. People were doing covers that had nothing to do with fashion. I do think that it made us reevaluate what is important to us and what is authentic. I think that everything will go back eventually. Magazines were already struggling. They were having a hard time with advertising. Pages were down. People look at things online now, and for me, it's a little difficult because I see a disconnect between looking at something on paper and looking at something online. It's true that with fashion, I'm not exactly a fashion expert. I only worked with fashion in the magazines. But working with photographers and working with film, I think that, I don't know. I really don't know where things are gonna go with this pandemic. I hope that things return to what they were before. But I do think we need to reevaluate how we consume things, how we look at things. And yeah, I don't know. I don't know, really. I don't know where we're going with this. I think it is hard, technology. I think we do need to be able to touch things. We need to be able to feel the products. It's true that I also watched some of these fashion shows online, and some of them were quite beautiful. They were like films. But there is also a disconnect. And I think with old-fashioned magazines, and you see a lot of it with independent magazines, that they're starting to have an editorial point of view. And I don't know. I hope I'm sorry, I don't know. I really don't know where we're going with this.
Thank you, Pamela. We don't know each other. A big thank to you. And to everyone, guests, audience, I look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks on Tuesday 27 on e-learning and virtual working. Our guests will be architect, engineer, and inventor Carlo Ratti from MIT, one of the designers of the Italian Pavilion at Expo, 2 sociologists of economics, Francesco Ramella from the University of Turin and Michele Rostan from the University of Pavia, then Hinda Rostamani, Dean of Student Affairs in Zion University, Abu Dhabi, and Pasquale Borea, Dean of the College of Law in the Royal University for Women, Bahrain. See you soon then. Bye-bye.